that whole sequence, there's a million opportunities for him to get fingered as the Skyjacker and, arrested immediately. And he hides in plain sight and somehow gets away with it.
That and so much more coming right up on today's episode of The Pod Spotter. You're listening to The Pod Spotter. I'm your host, Zack. There are a shitload of pods to weed through, and that's why we're here. We're going to do the heavy lifting. We're going to find the diamonds in the rough, and every Monday we'll talk to the creators and the hosts, and we're going to learn about their pods, and we're going to play clips, and hopefully you find it useful and entertaining, and you subscribe to our pod. Visit thepodspotter.com on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, @thepodspotter for extra content and information on upcoming pods. Thanks, everybody. Then, like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. It's really a pleasure. I've been screening hundreds of podcasts. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your podcast host speaking. We've now safely reached an altitude of 40,000 feet. We anticipate a smooth podcast and should be reaching our destination in approximately 45 minutes. We'd like to thank you for choosing the Pod Spotter. We know you have millions of podcasts to choose from, and we do appreciate your patronage. Tonight's in-flight entertainment comes to us from producers Joshua Shaffer and Eli Kooris as we discuss American Skyjacker, the 10-episode true crime drama podcast that examines the golden age of hijacking, a period of 5 years between 1967 and 1972, where there were over 300 commercial airplanes hijacked worldwide and 130 in the U.S. alone. That's like 2 per month here in the U.S. That's absurd. Thank you for being here, Josh and Eli, and thank you for letting us hijack your podcast for the day.
Solid intro, man. Solid intro. Yeah.
I was working on my pilot voice. I think I needed to drone a little bit. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, but I didn't want it to take too long.
That's all right.
Josh and Eli. Josh, would you maybe start with introducing yourself first and tell the folks who you are?
Yeah, my name is Josh Shaffer. I'm a writer and producer in Los Angeles. I've known Eli for 20 years now. We met freshman year of college, and we've been working together out in Los Angeles for over a decade.
And your co-writer, Eli.
I'm Eli Kooris. I have known Josh for 20 years. We met freshman year of college, as he just said. We both had fake IDs, which is why we got to be friends initially, I think. It was just convenient for buying alcohol.
So you have a history of being con men. Is that what drew you to this this story of hijacking and fake IDs? It's in your blood.
Yeah. Well, after working in Hollywood for 10 years, you can learn to be a con man a bit. No, we originally came across this because through another podcast, actually, the podcast Criminal, did their 100th and 101st episodes. Josh listens to more podcasts than I do, and he'd heard.
I just spend more time in the car. That's all.
Yeah, he spends more time in the car. And he'd heard these 2 episodes, and he's like, you got to hear this. So I listened to it, and then we found the article that Danny Wicentowski had written and hit him up. And our interest initially was to adapt it into a feature script or a television series. We'd sold about 6 original scripts up until that point to various studios in town. None of them had been made. And then we sort of got to work and wrote a treatment and outline and started up the mountain that it takes to actually adapt something into a feature film or a television series. It's writing out outlines and treatments, and then having meeting after meeting that kind of goes nowhere until you can finally start putting a package together. It just takes years. It takes so much time. And I was like, Martin McNally's still alive. Let's just go interview him. Let's just go get him on tape. basically. And so we flew to St. Louis and brought a small crew with us, and we shot with Martin McNally for 3 or 4 days. Followed him around a bit, but mainly it was just an interview about everything, about his entire life, camera setup, and just, get a cup of coffee with a little bit of whiskey in it, and cigarettes, and we just went. And that was the initial interview that sort of started the ball rolling.
I think when I first heard it, I was like, yeah, that's sort of everyone's impulse is, what? This is a movie. Why isn't this a movie? And I think it would potentially be an awesome movie, but I think it's a perfect podcast. Like, it is so tight in this form. It's 10 episodes. It's about hijacking planes. It is so darn exciting. And there is no fat on this pod. It is 10 tight episodes with twists and turns. You're learning things. There is archival audio, and the story really lends itself, I think, to this form, to the podcast form. And so, yes, I do agree. Script, awesome, great. But my God, you guys have made one of the tightest podcasts that we've listened to here.
Appreciate that, Zack.
It's a true crime genre, but it's not the sort of typical murder porn that you hear where it's just like, there's a death and we're going to drag it out for 7 episodes. Yeah. We're going to deep dive into this minutia about the place where the murder, it's none of that. You're going to get like action-packed nonsense the entire time. I just want to quickly play a bit from your trailer to help folks understand what the podcast is that we're talking about today. This is a bit from the trailer for American Skyjacker.
Just grab a weapon, grab a note, go on a plane, and order all the stuff you need. Parachutes, money, and bail out. I said, okay, this is it.
So he reached back and grabbed her gun. They started wrestling. While they're doing that, the aircraft starts falling out of the sky.
And I do remember the fear. It was very scary.
We're running at full speed. And I'm thinking, damn, at any moment here, we could get shot in the back.
She had told him what the real plan was for a prison break, and she had a gun.
I jumped on top of him and tried to grab his hands because he had a bomb.
He had to act on instinct, and coming from Vietnam, the battle in him just kicked in.
It took off toward that airplane, and it was very, very clear to all of us there, it's going to crash into that plane.
I've resorted to a 10-year-old whenever I've been telling people about this pod. I'm just the plane, and then get some money, and he jumps out, and it's so absurd.
The moment at the end there, where one of the people outside of the airport decides they're going to attempt to stop the hijacking, and they get in their car and they drive it onto the tarmac, was the moment in the initial when I was listening to the criminal pod that I called Eli, and I was like, I don't even need to listen anymore. You got to put this on and listen to this, because that was the moment where I was just like, we've gone beyond conventional storytelling. This is stranger than fiction territory.
Yeah.
And
that's before 20 more twists come.
Exactly. That's all in like basically the first part, just the first chapter of the McNally story. And I think when we were initially thinking about doing a scripted idea, we were struggling because there's the hijacking, which is just kind of balls to the wall fun. McNally's in above his head the whole time. And
we should explain McNally. So the story focuses on 5. There's 5 Skyjackers in it. The titular character, though, is this Martin McNally, whose voice we just heard, sort of the older gentleman. He's not the first Skyjacker we hear about. We hear about this D.B. Cooper first. Is that right? Mm-hmm. What's D.B. Cooper's deal?
So to sort of go back to the golden age of hijacking, which you set up and is set up in the trailer, there were 300 skyjackings between 1967 and 1972 because there just was no security at airports. I mean, airplane travel was this amazing new technology that people could do and participate in, and people would get dressed up before they got on the plane. People would have steak dinners, they actually had some leg room and everything. It was a really exciting thing to do. And you would literally walk onto the plane and get your ticket on the plane sometimes, like it was like a train back in the day. And soon enough, people were like, well, I could take advantage of this system by like saying I have a gun or a bomb, or actually having a gun or a bomb and hijacking the plane. And that's why these started happening so many times. Now, the majority of these were people just sort of pulling stunts or trying to make a political statement, like, fly me to Cuba. And because I hate the embargo, and they would fly to Cuba, and everybody would spend a weekend in Cuba who was on the plane who'd been taken hostage. There was actually an article that ran in Time magazine about what to do in Cuba if you're hijacked that they ran. It was like a funny travel piece, you know?
That's how common it was.
So common it was. So
it was like the third most common job. It was like school teacher, policeman, Skyjacker.
Skyjacker.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't even believe that. Like when we, in our modern sensibilities, as you said, like when you think about a visit to the airport and all the security check, taking off your shoes, all this stuff, you just can't even, like, we just don't even think about this time pre all of that, pre-security, where you're just like waltzing right on. You could just walk right in with a submachine gun.
It's just the idea of a skyjacking has completely changed. It's a completely different thing now. It's dangerous, it's sinister, it's evil, it's all of these things. And that was not so much the case. We like talk to Eli's point about this time in commercial air travel. You could walk onto a plane and like buy a ticket that you would dress up. It was a very romantic time for air travel. And it was people like Martin McNally that killed that romantic time of air travel. And had kind of paved the way to what air travel is today, with TSA and taking your shoes off. And, everybody hates the prep to going onto a flight. It's just it's no fun for anybody,
Let's hear from the prevalence of skyjacking at that time from your pod.
And in perhaps the most ridiculous reaction to the rash of hijackings, the FBI entertained the idea of building an exact replica of the Havana airport in Florida, so they could trick hijackers into thinking they'd made it to safe ground and then arrest them on U.S. soil. The plans were drawn up, but the dummy airport was never constructed.
Metal detectors are too inconvenient, but let's build a faux airport that looks like Cuba. Oh my gosh. It's just an absurd
backwards.
time. It's so backwards. So you knew you had a story, you knew you had a hit when you heard sort of some of the crazy elements coming from the story, the truck driver driving into the airplane, which we'll probably get to in a little bit. But tell me then how you get the story, how you guys procure this story, how you get Mac.
So we got Mac through Danny, and again, the intention still at this point was not to do a podcast. It was really just to get Mac on tape, because beyond interviews he'd done, like he does a brief interview with the Criminal Podcast. He did a couple interviews with a few other journalists, but nothing very long beyond what Danny had written. Getting him on tape was just to have him and just sort of see what we could do. And, worst case scenario being, we got this amazing story on tape. Could we turn it into something someday? It was really sort of more of a historical record. It was the sort of initial idea, and then to do a doc series off of that, perhaps. It wasn't really until we started pitching it out, and we'd done a number of these interviews, that the guys over at Imperative Entertainment, a guy named Gino Falsetto, who runs production over there, who brought us in, said, this seems like it could work as a podcast. Because all we really heard and all that had really been done as a podcast was McNally's story. It wasn't what was beyond that. And what's beyond that is really what sort of brings McNally's story full circle and really takes us in a completely different direction, wider scope, and a darker side of what this story turns into down the line.
We have a lot of podcast creatives that listen to this show, and I'm interested, and they probably might find it interesting, how you go from hearing a story that you are sort of lit on fire by to procuring that person's personal life. It might not be, I don't know, sexy to talk about, but I'm interested in just the nuts and bolts of getting McNally. Like, how do you acquire a human and their life experience?
Right. A contract. We had a couple conversations with him, and we said, this is what we want to do. We were completely transparent. This is what we want to do. This is the time it takes, let's do a deal. Let's figure it out. And he was game.
You're negotiating with a terrorist.
You're basically negotiating with the terrorist.
Nailed it.
Exactly. I think, we're doing another one of these, not about a skyjacker, but another one of these projects with a subject who is a felon, and a lot of it is do they trust you off the bat?
That's the ball game, because if McNally doesn't believe that we're being open and honest about everything, that our intentions with his story, then McNally is definitely somebody who would not be okay with that and could blow up the story, if he wanted to. And we just kept him in the loop, and we kept in communication with him, and
that trust is facilitated by you mentioned Danny, the third party who's not with us today, but whose voice we hear in the podcast narrating.
Correct. Yeah, Danny was a dream to work with, and really was the bridge between us and McNally.
It was integral to building that trust, and then helping us connect to other contacts that he'd made when he was writing the piece too. But as far as the construction of the podcast, when that was, well, where do we put all these pieces? You have all the pieces in front of you. How do you make it? How do you turn it into something that has those constant twists and turns? The one thing we were determined to do was not have the last few episodes kind of duds, which a lot of podcasts I feel suffer in that.
Sometimes with true crime specifically, it can be, the buildup is always so exciting, and especially with the darker ones, the murders, the unsolved murders and whatnot. And we didn't have that hook because our guy is telling the story. So we knew right away he's the guy who hijacked the plane. So we just needed to figure out a way that we could keep the twists and turns consistent over the course of 10 episodes and have an ending that we felt was satisfying.
Well, it is so satisfying. And again, I never had that experience of like watching a Netflix doc where I'm like, really? And a whole episode on how they make the tiger cage, or I don't know, like, there's just no extra anything. It's so good. And we might talk about some of the elements here for those of you that are fans of true crime drama, podcast dramas, and don't want anything spoiled. I assure you, we cannot spoil all of the twists and turns of this podcast because there are just so many, but we will be talking about some of the elements within the story. And I just want to start with Mac, our main skyjacker. And just one thing I didn't get when I listened to the Criminal podcast that I get with yours is just how darn likable he is, which is sort of the secret sauce of this thing. Like, you are rooting for this antihero, you're rooting for Mac, and it's something with how you just set him up. Was it? I guess my question is, was it deliberate how you sort of framed him pre skyjacking? And I just want to play a little bit from Mac's early days.
It was during this period when an event occurred that would change Martin McNally for life.
About 3 or 4 days later, at approximately 9:55, and I hear a noise, and the noise went like this. I said, damn, it sounds like a plane crashed.
An aircraft returning from a rescue operation had crashed on its approach nearby. It was a crisis. And it was here that Mac discovered he could handle one.
I said, listen, they need a rescue crew. We need 6 people right now. I said, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You guys are all part of the rescue crew. Let's go. And we ran to the truck, and it took about 10 or 15 minutes to get to the bottom of the mountain. And I see that this plane is burning. Now, there was a stench of burning flesh. Bad stench.
You set up the guy who can handle himself under pressure, and also the guy who does the right thing, like who just, acts. And you set up, just his backstory so well. Was that a conscious choice to say, we got to get people on board for him before we go into the nasty stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, criminals aren't just born, you're kind of made. But I think, at least, especially with somebody like Mac, who, as you'll learn, is not a violent criminal at the end of the day. He has every opportunity to be violent throughout. And I think maybe going to prison made him do things they didn't necessarily want to do or was initially born to do. But, initially hijacking the plane, that is kind of the big mystery of this whole story too. Like, why did he do it? Why did the guy who's the middle child of 8 kids from a upper middle class Roman Catholic family in Michigan decide to become a skyjacker after spending time in the Navy, And so that mystery is sort of what we're starting to solve here by building his character. And then you're into the action, and then we try to solve the rest of it later down the line.
Yeah, and it wasn't hard. I mean, we didn't know all of that stuff coming into the story. We knew some of it, but the way that Mac tells it, and it was clear just from him telling the story that, like Eli said, he wasn't a violent man, and he was somebody who he's got an anti-establishment current running through him. But he's somebody who obviously, as you just heard, like looks out for his fellow man.
What's most interesting about that story that you played too, that clip, it was a good one to play, is that, it was a plane crash that was the most traumatizing to him. And, he even swore he would never fly on a plane again after that. And then ironically makes his mark by hijacking a plane.
Right. But you also say that, you also set up some trauma and some dark stuff in his life. And so it's not hard to diagnose. Like, yeah, I can see this guy kind of going off the rails a little bit. He had a weird relationship with his dad and stuff.
Yeah. Weird family relationship. I also just think there's an aspect of Mac where he didn't want to be that cookie cutter lifestyle. He didn't want to live in that cookie cutter lifestyle. He came out of the Navy, he got married, he was living in the suburbs. And then I think he just said, this isn't the way I want to live the next 50 years of my life. I think subconscious decision there where it's more fun to be a criminal.
He was kind of presented with a predetermined path and rejected it outright. His family business, like the getting married young, all of that stuff. It seemed to be not a fit for Mac.
I get it. As a creative and just an actor for the last 15 years, do you guys, you're writers and you do a very unconventional sort of, there's an unconventional means to your living. Do you sort of, are you attracted to this story on that sort of going against the fray and paving his own path, sort of aspect of Mac's life? Yeah.
I mean, I think this one and then the next one, which I've been keep teasing, and I'll finally tell you all about it. Yeah. This idea of profiling people who have lived lives and made livelihoods or attempted to make livelihoods off of doing something unconventional that's technically illegal or very illegal, is very much a draw. I mean, I think that's what we do for a living, hey, I'm going to get up in the morning and I'm going to write the things that are in my head and make a living doing it. And most people are just like, what? How could you make that happen?
Yeah. And I think that this podcast is a 10 episode escape from normal life. And I think that that's one of the reasons why we write also, is to just get outside of the conventional, walls and the places that we live and exist and just kind of go somewhere else and be somebody else for a little bit,
I definitely was thinking about that while we're living in this time where it's wash your hands for 30 seconds, wear your we're all very structured right now and following all these rules. And so your podcast is hitting people at a time where they're feeling very confined by what they can and can't do. And here you have a guy who's just whatever he wants to do, throw caution to the wind, and we're going to see where the chips fall. We'll see where the money falls, basically.
Yeah.
How did you get this sort of archival stuff, though? All of the news, talk about retrieving some of that stuff, because there's a ton of just, local news and national news audio.
Part of it was just simple searches online, digging. There's some other archival libraries that we reached out to and got some archival from. And then once we find all the things that we want to use, we use the fair use laws, and we go to attorneys and we have them say, you can use this supports the story in the gray area of fair use. And you make sure that it's protected, and then you put it in there.
Yeah. And you have to get creative about it, because sometimes they'll be like, you can use 10 seconds from this clip.
Oh, wow.
And you have to make sure you find the most crucial 10 seconds from that clip to put in there.
Well, let's hear a little over 10 seconds from some of your archival stuff.
There's another hijacking in progress tonight. An American Airlines jet, Flight 119, hijacked while en route from St. Louis to Tulsa, Oklahoma. The hijacker reportedly asking for $500,000 ransom. He forced the plane to return to St. Louis. He allowed 80 passengers to get off. However, he's holding 14 male passengers and 7 crew members hostage. The latest is that the plane has taken off again from St. Louis, circling over the St. Louis area. It's not known whether the hijacker intends to fly on to some other destination or wait in the air until his demands are met.
There are 2 of those a month. It's just crazy.
2 of those a month. Yeah. Yeah.
He mentioned 14 passengers in that clip, 14 men. And there's one of my favorite moments when you also fall in love with Mac is when he's hijacking the plane and he's like, everybody get off. You know, he wants to get rid of anybody that has a condition. And I want to hear what happens to Mac when he tries to let all women and children off and sick people.
When we landed, I told the stewardess, I said, give the pilot this message here. We're going to release from this plane all the women and children and anybody on here who takes medications or have heart problems. We need to get them off this plane. I want healthy people on this plane.
He did not want stairs. He thought perhaps the FBI or somebody would come on. They pulled the slide. All the women and children were allowed to leave. The captain called back on the interphone and said, ask him if it's all right to let any man with a heart condition or someone who takes medication off. McNally said, okay. And the captain made the announcement, and anybody with a heart condition may also leave. And we had 25 heart patients. He got his machine gun and he said, get some of them back here.
That's awesome. Yeah, everybody was sick that day.
Yeah.
Get me off.
Probably one of my favorite characters from the podcast, Sharon Matteo, the flight attendant.
Yeah, who's Sharon?
She was just a delightful woman and had a sharp memory of the events, and it's just infinitely likable.
Was she okay with revisiting it? Was there any hesitation on her part to be like?
She was all about it. Some other items were not all about it. I think she found that, I think in retrospect, she has is really glad she had the experience to an extent. Like, she wants to meet Mac and everything like that. I'd love to see them meet someday, actually. Maybe that happens down the line.
Oh my gosh, for your follow-up pod. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, for the doc. You know.
Yeah, she's the one that calls him a nice hijacker, right? He was a very nice, as though she had other suitors.
Yeah, exactly.
Other gentlemen hijackers. Of all my hijackers, really nice one. Have you heard from anybody, any of the main characters that didn't like how they were portrayed, or had a problem with sort of the storytelling?
No, everybody's really liked it so far. The Oswald family didn't want to speak to us for obvious reasons, to totally go on the record. They might in the future.
Remind me who the Oswald family was.
So as you'll find out, not to give too much away, but the when Mac is in prison, he meets another skyjacker, a man named Garrett Trapnell, who we have as well. And then Garrett Trapnell has fans because a book has been written about him. It was a New York Times bestseller about his life and times as a con man and skyjacker, called The Fox is Crazy Too. And that leads to a woman named Barbara Oswald, who is a military veteran who has 5 children herself, as a single mom, has sort of put her life together after a very rough childhood, reads The Fox is Crazy Too and becomes obsessed with Garrett Trapnell and starts visiting the prison. And Garrett Trapnell and Martin McNally plot to convince Barbara to hijack a helicopter and fly it into the prison to break them out. And she does it. And so that sort of sets up our episode 5 through 7. And her family was obviously affected by this.
Yeah, that makes sense. That is the real sort of only human tragedy in this pod. That's the sort of element you remember, or the moment you realize, like, oh, this isn't some fun, fluff, entertaining, just like catch me if you can story. People get destroyed in this, and it's very sobering. Can I ask about the money, actually, before we get to jail? The money kept coming up for me. The money was, what was confusing was he asked for $500,000, right? In the criminal pot, 502,000. He wants 2,000 in walking around money. Right. He has $500,000 in 2 bags, though, isn't it?
It was I think it was delivered in 2 bags, but he put it into 1 bag.
Delivered in 2 bags. It's in 1. See, I don't know about this all in 1 bag thing. I have a theory about this because he asked for a shovel too. He asked for a military shovel.
Right.
Because he was going to dig. He was going to dig a hole. So he's got a bag of 100 and a bag of 400,000, which he combines allegedly into 1. Jumps out of the plane, loses the bag. It washes up on a farm somewhere. But maybe that 100,000 was still out there. Maybe, possibly. No.
Maybe we go dig in some fields in Indiana and we get lucky. I don't know.
Yeah.
So that one I had trouble tracking that because I was like, okay, he's got a shovel. It's definitely in 2 bags. But then all of a sudden we only hear about 1 bag, and the government, when the news, they wouldn't want to report that there's still money missing when they say that a bag of money has shown up. So folks, if you're in Indiana, all I'm saying is find that pig farm and go look for some money. All right, one quick break. We're here to fill the role of looking for great content for you. If you like this show, please check us out and subscribe. Visit thepodspotter.com and on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at thepodspotter for lots of good stuff. Please, please, please leave a review while you're there. Subscribe, rate, review, judge us on Apple Podcasts, and please help spread the word. We release every Monday with a review of a great new pod, and we're just going to keep on going, plowing ahead, 1 a week, so please keep listening. If you have suggestions for pods to feature, drop us a note on any of those social media platforms or at thepodspotter.com. Thanks, everybody. Guys, you probably notice a wall of pod swag behind me. And your podcast could also enter the bookshelf of pod swag. This is a Skyjacker hat for your skyjacking purposes. Just throw that on and walk into American Airlines. I want to get your hat on the pod of swag behind me. If you answer me these 3 questions correctly in a segment we like to call How Well Do You Know Your Pod? 3 questions about your podcast, answered 2 out of 3 correctly, and American Skyjacker makes the wall of swag forever.
Oh man, that is enticing.
High pressure. Here we go.
Guys, this is about high. This is a high pressure show, a high pressure podcast. You should be. All right. Are you ready for How Well You Know Your Pod? Question number 1. Where would Mac go to convert his slugs in the early days as a con man? Pre-hijacking, Mac had a con. He'd put metal slugs somewhere and convert them to quarters.
Yeah, I'm going to just go ahead and jump in and say the laundromat.
Oh, yeah? Oh, you think you got it? Let's hear it.
I could punch out approximately $500 to $600 in these slugs. And to convert them into cash, I would go into laundromats, coin machines at laundromats, and drop in all these quarter slugs and pull out the change.
Laundromat is correct. 1 out of 1. Eli, did you know that?
I actually got nervous for a second. I was like, did I get this right?
I wasn't sure if you meant laundromat or where the guy was. No, where is the guy who would make the slugs for him? But
number 2, why did Mac choose the hostage he chose to grab the money? So we're on the plane, hijacking in process.
I know this.
You guys got this?
You better get this right.
Was the ridiculous red pants.
Let's have a listen.
The stewardess said, what's next? What are you going to do next? I says, well, we got the money. We got the parachutes. We got all the other things that I asked for. And we're going to have to get it on board. So I said, tell one of the passengers here to go pick up the money. This guy, I guess he had red pants. Ridiculous red pants. Who wears bright red pants? What middle-aged man? I've never seen it in my life. So he's got these red pants on. And he goes out and picks up the money.
This gentleman had bright red pants and a polyester. This was 1972. And I don't think he wore those anymore on a plane because he did kind of stand out.
Mac is my grandfather, right? Mac is everyone's grandfather. You could just
it's the best. That's one of my favorite Mac moments in there.
What kind
and to be, a lot of interview subjects are not so good at bringing you through a story beat by beat by beat. And Mac was so good at that, where he could slow things down and just kind of take you through it moment by moment. And a lot of people, you need to get them there. And Mac just kind of brought that. He's really good at it.
He sets it up real nice.
Yeah.
And then just tease off.
That's another detail about him too that we forgot to mention, and that we actually did an interview with some of his friends very late in the whole process, and we didn't include them, at least in the podcast. And they mentioned that he had a photographic memory, and it really shows. Like, he has told this story. We interviewed him about having him repeat himself multiple times, and everything was exact. He's been through a lot. He's in his mid-70s at this point, and still mind like a steel trap. Amazing.
Yeah. It's amazing what he can recall. It really is. That's 2 out of 2. Let's see if you get the third one, and if you do, that's where it's going to live, right there on the top shelf. If you go 3 out of 3, American Skyjacker, top shelf pod. Mac never left his hideout except to use the phone. So this is we're post jump. He's hiding out from the feds. He never left that hideout, the lodge, except to use the phone and to buy what?
Do we need to be specific in what he was going to buy?
He mentioned something specific. Brand names.
It was, I think it was it Coke or Pepsi, Josh? I'm not answering it yet.
Yeah. I know it's a soda. I know it's a cola. I don't know if it's Coke or Pepsi. I want to say it's Coke, but I'm not positive.
I think it's Coke. Is Coke a sponsor?
Let's have a listen.
I never left that lodge for anything. But I left my room to go down and buy some beverages, Coke or Pepsi or something like that. Later, I heard reports that someone said that an FBI agent had passed me on the stairs and didn't realize that it was me.
Another just crazy element of this thing. Yeah. FBI passes him on the stairs. The whole state is searching for this man, and he's going down to get a soda. FBI agent passes him. He had a couple of these moments.
That whole sequence, there's a million opportunities for him to get fingered as the skyjacker and arrested immediately, and he hides in plain sight and somehow gets away with it.
My entire audience has left to go listen to your pod. They don't want us to talk about it anymore, so it's okay to share that the close calls by this point. I think as soon as I played the trailer, everyone was like, "Well, I'm out of here. See ya." We get to prison then. Mac does get caught, and we meet, which could have been its own separate podcast. We meet Garrett Trapnell, the other hijacker, as you mentioned before, who takes down Barbara and her entire family. And was there ever a moment where you were like, this feels like a second thing? Like this could be your second podcast. Do we focus all on Mac in one and then Trapnell in the second? Or did you consciously decide, let's just throw it all into the same bowl?
There was definitely a discussion about, can we do something separately with Garrett Trapnell? The issue is that, and to give something away, unfortunately, Garrett Trapnell is dead. So having that first person perspective is gone. Garrett Trapnell's family has been very interested in speaking with us. In fact, his daughter reached out the other day to speak with us. We also spoke with the son of the man, Elliot Asanoff's son, Martin Asanoff. Elliot Asanoff is a writer. He wrote a famous book called 8 Men Out, which he later did the screenplay for, which won an Academy Award, and a number of other books. And this was one of his true crime books that he wrote by interviewing Garrett Trapnell in prison, and wrote The Fox is Crazy too. So there is a ton of dimension, which is why we had to put this story in there, and how this story goes to all these other parts of America, if you will. Like, we're in high level Hollywood. Like, Elliot Asanoff was the brother-in-law to Marlon Brando, and was working in the entertainment industry. And so the entertainment industry kind of comes into this criminal world too, and is sort of what influences Barbara to do what she did. If this book had never been written, she wouldn't have known who Garrett Trapnell was, and would have continued living her upstanding life as a mother of 5 children, and not decided to become a criminal and hijack a helicopter and plan a prison escape. So it really sort of is an amazing addition, and is a different storyline, but sort of fit perfectly into the larger storyline, because Martin McNally is our star because he's still alive, really, at the end of the day. You have 4 main characters and 3 of them are dead, and he's the only one who can really tell the story at this point.
So just to spell it out, Mac is in jail. He gets a knock on his door from Garrett Trapnell. He's a hijacker. Mac's a hijacker. He gets a knock on the door from another skyjacker who's in there, and the two of them hatch this plan. And let's just hear a little bit about Garrett Trapnell from that book that you mentioned. This is Elliot Asinoff's book, The Fox is Crazy 2, where he describes our second skyjacker, third really of your podcast, Garrett Trapnell.
Brilliant, complex, insane. Above all, he was a man with a rage. He raged against the established order, the system, as he referred to it, with intent to beat it in every way he could. He became a genius at conceiving and executing all manners of schemes. He was a bandit, a highwayman, a brigand from the Romantic era. He lived by a rigorous code of values that precluded violence. He never robbed a working man. His targets were always institutions of the system, banks, supermarkets, credit emporiums. He was always polite to those he had to control, as he was contemptuous of the institutions they worked for. He saw the present with a clinically cold eye, and it was all a cheat. The laws were made by hypocrites for fools to obey, expending themselves to make enough money to buy a show of affluence. The worst joke of all was that the biggest rip-offs commanded the greatest dignity. Couldn't everybody see that only the cheats and swindlers and the exploiters were rich?
I'm so glad that I have that book to follow up your podcast with, because that's where I'm headed right after this.
Tough to find.
Did you get a copy? Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's tough to find. Yeah.
Danny hasn't done Audible. Danny hasn't narrated the Audible version of it.
He'd be great at it.
No, not yet. It is out of print currently. That said, we have the rights to it. So if somebody wants to,
that's amazing.
But about that clip, it's a testament to Elliot Asinoff's writing. He's a great writer. He wrote romantically about Trapnell, and that's part of the reason why Barbara got seduced by the writing and by the character of Trapnell. But let's be very clear that Trapnell was somebody who may have been polite to the people he needed to control, as is said in that clip, but was somebody who was not afraid about leaving them absolutely decimated in his wake, in his criminal wake. And I think that in a lot of ways, the role that Trapnell fills in this story is he's kind of Mac's criminal inner voice unleashed, without consideration for other people in a lot of ways. And I don't want to say that he's the villain of the story, but he is definitely somebody who seduces also Mac in prison and, kind of brings him into his under his spell a little bit.
I'm just struck by the access these two had, to each other during their trial. They're on trial for a skyjacking, attempting to escape prison by radicalizing this fan of Trapnell, and they're communicating about the next one. So these are two guys that have skyjacked in the past to get to jail, are on trial for another skyjacking, and are plotting their third skyjack. Like, did you talk to him? Did you talk to Mac about why no red flags went up, and these two were able to spend so much time together during the trial?
It's an absurd sort of loophole that I think existed more in the 70s in prison than would ever happen now. It's also the fact that Trapnell had access to Barbara Oswald's daughter, and was smart enough to also see the hole in the system where it's like, well, if I represent myself, I get access to all of the defense witnesses, and that would be Barbara Oswald's daughter. So maybe there's a way out here. The guy was always scheming and trying to get out. As far as Mac's response to all that, he says that all he wanted to do when he was in prison was get out of prison, no matter whatever it took. He was going to get out of prison. He was going to try to. And I think that he and Trapnell both had that mindset too. And when you go there, you transform as a person, you turn into something else, something much worse. Not to say that Trapnell wasn't already a sociopath, but I think it definitely made Mac worse being confined like that.
And testament to Mac's appeal as a main character, he's very forthcoming about that. He even says at one point, we were monsters in the way that we thought about using these people to help us get out of prison. And so, it's stuff like that does make it easier to root for him, that he's so open about it,
Yeah, these monsters, we love them, though. Like, when you look at Breaking Bad, Mad Men, you look at some of the top, well, Tiger King of, the pandemic days, we seem to be attracted to these stories of madmen. What is that about? What's going on? I think this will be just as big as one of those once, you guys are all done with all of this. Why do we celebrate these guys?
It's an escapism aspect. It's something that we've always wished we could do, like that's a big part of it. Like, breaking the rules is a big fantasy, It's not just dreamscapes, it's like doing what everybody tells you not to do. And also, like, with Breaking Bad, for example, Walter White ends up in that situation out of circumstance. And Mac definitely made the decision to hijack the plane, but the whole time, to a certain extent, his circumstance and his upbringing, but also no one's hurt along the way. The only people who are hurt are himself and David Hanley, at least physically hurt, So there's a bit of a gray area there when you're deciding whether or not to root for somebody, and if you can stick with them for multiple episodes or a longer period of time. As long as they're not directly hurting anybody else, it's easier for an audience to do it.
Do you have Mac on tape responding to listening to the pod? Does he like it?
Yeah, I got a note from him last night. How much he likes it again. He sends me notes. Yeah, I get notes from him a couple times a week. But yeah,
usually in all caps.
It's all caps.
Man, how is he? Is he tech savvy, or?
I wouldn't say savvy. Yeah. Actually, this one's not in all caps, Josh. I've started getting some.
Does Mac use emojis?
No, he doesn't use emojis, but all caps always seems like yelling. I just don't think that he knew to turn the caps lock off. All right, the reviews of the podcast are 99% positive. A credit to your work and the choices that I made.
There you go.
Wait a second, Mac is reading reviews. You got to talk to Mac.
Oh yeah,
you can't. Yeah. He's eating it up.
I'm sure he's like tried to track down the people who left bad reviews. Are there any bad reviews? I think there's a few.
Yeah, of course.
And he's on their shit list, which you don't want to be. You don't want to be on that.
Don't want an ex-con, ex-felon, ex-skyjacker on you. Yeah, guys, don't leave bad reviews of this pod. Mac has weird resources and probably some buried treasure somewhere in Indiana. So take it easy there. Tell me about the slow burn of releasing an awesome pod like this. It's not like, you've done films before where there's a premiere and you get to sort of sit around and celebrate the thing all together at once. Is it like stuff trickling in, or what is it like releasing a hit like this?
It was originally, let's release the first 2, and then we decided to release the first 3 just because, like, you really sort of ramp up in action and octane, I guess. By the episode 3, you're like mid hijacking at that point.
And the jumps in 3, which is
yeah. It was obviously exciting to get it out there and everything like that and see the response. Everything's been just weird during the pandemic in general, though.
Yeah.
So like, I don't know. Nothing surprises me anymore. And because of that, I'm kind of like, that was exciting. Was it exciting? I don't know.
yeah.
But yeah, the contrast to like a film premiere is that there's no real opening weekend. So it's like you release this thing to the world, and the way that it was released by the studio was 3 episodes at first and then an episode a week. And so the way that a podcast works is like, yeah, we did get a nice boom of listeners right out of the gate. But I think that a lot of people like to binge their podcasts. So a lot of people want to consume it 10 episodes in a row, back to back. And it's all about word of mouth and people telling friends about it.
It's the first one I screened that I had to pleasure delay. And I was like, only 2 left. I'm just going to put that on the back burner a little bit because there's only 2 episodes left. Pod pleasure delaying definitely will occur when listening to American Skyjacker. I tell everybody about it and I get about like 2 things in and they're like, stop, I'm listening, stop. I got it. Okay, I'll go get it. I just want to play one more piece from Mac. You talked about how he affected history, like multiple decades. There is a Forrest Gump aspect to your story where he like actually changes history based on his decisions multiple times in multiple generations.
Something else happened in this thing, and it's my worst nightmare. We were sending out all these letters, sometimes 50 to 100 letters a day, all over the country, to news media. We were everywhere, especially in Marion at W3D radio. Every day they were talking about these prisoners who were running for president. And we were at the prison just laughing like hell, having fun. In March of 1979, Norman Carlson, of the Bureau of Prisons director in Washington, D.C., issued a press release, and here's what he said. Under no circumstances can the Bureau of Prisons allow its prisoners to run for elective office while in prison. So, effective in June, there's not going to be any more free postage.
He just ruined mailing the way prisoners can mail letters for all of time. This guy did more in jail, by the way, than I've done. You know, as a
he's very productive.
So productive. President. He's like playing the stock market, just making thousands of dollars. He's out of his mind.
But there's a little hint of it in there where he says, "Is my worst nightmare," and he goes more into it later on after that. But just the fact that he did that he was responsible for that, and that the government makes more money because of him. That's, I think, the biggest offense. I mean, yes, to his fellow prisoners, it was not the best thing to have happen, but he, he's just not a government guy,
Right. Is he doesn't seem remorseful of any of it either. It's just sort of the circumstances of his life. This is what happens. Is he at all proud of any of the accomplishments? Is he?
I think he regrets what happened with Barbara Oswald and Rob.
Definitely,
Oswald. And we explore that a lot later in the pod. But I think he'd also try to hijack the plane again if given the opportunity, just do it better, I don't think he would do it obviously at this point in his life, but I think like if he could rewind everything, there's a part of him that I think is happy that he had that experience too. I don't know if he's happy about 37 years in prison, federal prison, but he definitely lived a super interesting life.
Yeah.
He almost kills himself when he's realized he's lost the money and he's still 10,000 feet above the ground with a parachute on. He almost takes off the parachute. But I think that it was just sort of coming to that plus the concussion he gets later. He's still sort of trying to come to grips with what's happening at that moment. There's many times I could have cut his losses. He had gotten away. They didn't know it was him. Yeah. And he could have very easily gotten out of town and just been like, don't know what you're talking about. It wasn't me. And probably could have gotten away with it in court. It was the fact that he had planned to go do it again.
Like his whole thing was that he was just going to get on another plane and hijack another plane after the heat had passed. So I think that he saw losing the money as a failure of what he set out to achieve, and he was going to do it come hell or high water.
The money was success, and he didn't have it.
Yeah.
Good point. Well, you proved very knowledgeable on your own podcast, but maybe I could stump you screenwriters on some more trivia about skyjacking. How about movie skyjacking? You answered 3 out of 3 correctly of your own pod, but let's see how well you do with a little skyjacking movie trivia. 3 questions based on skyjacking movies, and then maybe I'll let you go here. Screenwriters, how well do you know skyjacking movies? Are you ready? First question. Just paroled Army Ranger Cameron Poe is headed back to his wife, but he must fly home aboard a prison transport dubbed Jailbird with some of the worst criminals living. Name that movie. Name that skyjacking movie.
It's Con Air, man. It's a classic.
Air, man.
It's a classic.
Con Air.
There's one really ridiculous.
Oh, there's more than one. Yeah.
Well, the meme is the breeze through the hair.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, Malkovich is great in that film.
So
yeah.
Cusack, it's fine.
Cusack, yeah.
Buscemi steals it, right? He's like the most violent.
He's a psycho, and we love him because he's nice to a little girl. It's like,
who directs the movie of American? Is it Michael Bay? Does Michael?
It's Simon West. It's Simon West who directed it. Yeah.
No. Who directs American Skyjacker?
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
I need lens flares and
I mean, the Coen brothers would direct the actual Mac hijacking section of it for sure. I think
for sure.
Yeah.
One out of 3. Let's do the next one. After making a speech in Moscow vowing to never negotiate with terrorists, President James Marshall boards a plane with his family and advisors when a group of terrorists hijack the flight.
Air Force One.
Boom, baby. These screenwriters know they're hijacking. Was this part of the research for this pod? Just watching skyjacking movies? It's pretty good.
Do we know our screenwriting or do we know our mediocre 90s action movies? You know?
Mediocre? How dare you?
Dude, I watched that movie again. It is completely ridiculous. It is so ridiculous.
But is it? I mean, look at Mac's story. Is it ridiculous?
It's true. Maybe it's not. I just don't see the president doing that.
I can never watch another bad action movie and think this is implausible. This would never happen.
That's right.
So I'm just going to be like, no, it happens in Mac's story. If you're watching Mac's story, you are thinking like you're like, this is I'm out of here. Like if that were fiction, you'd be like, nah, this is dumb. I'm walking out. Nobody drives a car into a plane.
You keep bringing up that you've told other people about the pod and sort of set it up for them, which I think is great because, when we were telling people what we were working on and when other people who were working on the podcast were telling people what they were working on, it just ends up being a 20-minute conversation. You can't just like roughly, I'm just working on something about a skyjacking airplane. Okay, tell me more. And then you start telling them more and you're down the rabbit hole. I mean, you just can't stop because it's just so ridiculous.
Yeah. 2 out of 3. That ain't bad. Let's see if we can go 3 for 3 with Neville Flynn of the FBI boards a flight from Hawaii to Los Angeles. That word was Hawaii to Los Angeles. Escorting a witness to trial. An onboard assassin releases a deadly agent in an attempt to kill the witness. Flynn and a host of passengers and crew must band together to survive. Name that skyjacking movie.
Yeah, I don't know this one. What's the character's name?
Nelville Flynn.
Nelville.
That's
the FBI boards a. That's a movie name.
That's a movie name.
It feels like an older one.
I don't know. Yeah, a deadly agent.
A witness. Mm-hmm. An onboard assassin releases a deadly agent in an attempt to kill the witness. So
the deadly agent's not snakes, is it?
Is it snake?
Okay, can we ask follow? Yeah.
Snake.
Wow, way to go. Way to ferret that out. That was, again, the duo, the team effort. Josh picked up on the deadly agent weird thing.
Yeah.
Eli took it home. Snakes on a plane is correct. That's 3 for 3 with skyjacking movies. The skyjacking hat remains forever. I wanted to ask one more question that I love to ask, and I always forget to ask. If there was a podcast Hall of Fame, which American Skyjacker will inevitably be in, and you had an American Skyjacker kiosk off in the corner, and you go over to the sort of display, there's pictures of Mac and you guys and everything, and you hit the red button. What piece of audio from this experience?
Oh, I got this one.
Right off the bat. Go ahead.
Yeah, because it's a joke in my household. It would be Mac saying, "We've got a problem." Because he says it multiple times throughout, and it's just the perfect Mac soundbite, in my opinion. And we say it. My 1.5-year-old has started to mimic it. We say it in the house whenever there's an issue in any capacity.
It's also like the dopey henchman line in every like 1950s. Hey, we got a problem.
We got a problem.
You're not offering anything, Mac. I need solutions. You're not telling me anything. I see the helicopter crashing. This is not helpful right now, Mac. Hey, we got a problem.
That would be my.
You go up to the red button and it just says, Mac, we got a problem. That's pretty good. Eli.
The one that always stands out is it is actually in one of our promotional videos, our trailer videos, but the decision to actually hijack the plane, which he sums up in, you got to pump up your nuts and do this thing.
Yeah.
And the pump up your nuts is something that I'd never really heard before, but I find myself wanting to say it a lot.
The Macisms. Listen, when the movie gets made and you are doing the promotional stuff, please have a Mac doll that just when you hit the hand, it does, we got a problem. So pull up your nuts and do this thing. What would be the other one? I wanted to marry her. Or he always looks.
He always wants to marry. He always wants to marry the nice woman he meets.
Me Too vernacular for dealing with women is it probably gets you into some troubles. I don't think anyone was listening after I played the trailer. They went to listen to your pod, but now they're definitely not listening because it's the last 5 minutes of our episode. And as you know, no one listens to the last 5 minutes of any podcast. By now, they're taking the kids to school and they finished their jog. So no one is here. And if you'd like to share anything, tell off a former boss, recite poetry, share an anecdote about your child, now is your time to do so. And I, of course, will go first for the last 5 minutes. I wanted to share, this was an airplane secret that I don't think I've ever told anyone, but it was about the first time I ever flew first class. Poor kid growing up, probably, didn't really fly till I was 13. So flying first class was a treat, was a big accomplishment for me. And I'm such a scumbag that I wanted that look. When you walk past people in first class, you want to look at them, but you don't want to look at them because you're jealous of the first class amenities. But you're like, what is this? Is this person famous? That look of like, man, I want that. Well, I wanted to experience that sitting in first class. I wanted to experience other people wondering how I achieved this level of status in my life, but I didn't want to look at people. So I just put my phone like this and I recorded people walking by me on a plane so that I can enjoy the experience of them looking at me in first class, because that is the level of scumbaggery that I would resort to. And when I went, I couldn't look at it. I played it back on my phone and the first person, and it was too sad. I was like, what am I doing? I don't need this. I don't need to look at this.
Funny that you mentioned first class because this.
Perfect segue. Thank you for setting that up for us.
You guys fly first class all the time, I assume.
No, never. This was my first time. This story was my first time.
So we sold. There's a script we wrote called Death in the Modern Age, about a guy who fakes his own death, starts a new life. Anyway, we'd sold the script to Dimension Television, the Weinstein company, basically. Bob Weinstein.
I would say let's rewind even further back to how we sold it to Dimension, because this is kind of just it's a little bit of an industry story. So good.
I love it.
Thank God nobody's listening.
Yeah, no one's here.
But it was one of the crazy things that you get the opportunity to work on, and that Dimension was trying to turn Scream into a television show, and they did for a while. I don't think it did very well, but we were contacted and asked to come up with our take on what Scream would look like as a TV series. So basically come up with a series pitch, do it in 4 days. Yeah.
Oh boy.
So this was, we've come up with original series. We've done takes on other people's ideas, but usually you have weeks to come up with something like that. So 4 days, and it was going to be a bake off. So it was like 4 days, you need to go in, you need to pitch the whole series, and you're going to be back to back to back with other writers. So in those 4 days, we're on phone call with a couple of the executives at Dimension, and we're young screenwriters at this point. I was at my day job when we were on this phone call. I ducked into an edit bay to have this phone call with a couple of executives, and we're talking about just kind of initial ideas that we have, and all of a sudden, Bob Weinstein literally just picks up the phone, goes, "Boys!" And he was just very, very excited to talk to us.
Yelling tone the whole time.
Yeah.
Very, very nice yell, if there is such a thing. But it was a yell the whole time of how much he liked our script that he'd read and everything like that.
Yeah, and he was like, Bob Weinstein over at Dimension. I just want to say I read your script, Death in the Modern Age, and I love it. Who owns it? I want it. What's going on with it? And we were like, what do we do with this information? So anyways, cut to 6 months later, we have gone through the process of trying to shop this idea. It had been through a few rewrites and iterations, and we were at the 2-yard line with a potential buyer. And that morning, somehow, our phones ring, and it's Bob Weinstein calling our personal cell phones, which is weird. So we didn't call him back, and we called our reps, and we were like, what's going on? Like we're supposed to be closing a deal with this one company, and now Bob Weinstein is calling us, which is very unusual. Not trying to like say like, oh, aren't we big shots? Like very unusual. What he was doing was trying to outbid the potential buyer that was coming in because he wanted this script so bad. So we were like, this is Bob Weinstein. This is Bob Weinstein pre Me Too and pre all of that. And we were just very excited to talk to him. And so we ended up partnering with the Weinstein Company. And one of the first things that they wanted to do was attach an actor to our main character. And so that was the first time I ever flew first class, was the trip out to New York.
Wow. So we get an actor finally interested. Takes a few months. We get an actor interested. He's in New York, wants to meet with us. They're like, we're going to fly you to New York for the weekend to meet with this actor. We won't say his name on this. Sure. You know, I don't remember. I think you were like, Josh, I take red eyes to Jersey all the time. Let's do the red eye. We're like, all right, I guess we'll do a red eye. So we jump.
Wait. Hang on. They wanted to get us out there as soon as possible. And the whole idea is like, you get out there, you spend 2 days with this guy talking about the material, and then you're back in LA. Like, you know, they just wanted to get us back and forth as quickly as possible.
So we're like, okay, great. You know, so they're like flying first class, JetBlue, new first class. I remember there's an email, it was like, it's a super nice first class. Like, okay, great, whatever. Flying first class. This is exciting. So we get on the plane, we're psyched. You know, we're going to New York. We're getting the weekend paid for in New York. We're flying first class. We get to hang out with a movie star. And we get on the plane, and the plane takes off. This is a red eye, mind you, 6 hours. And they literally said, there's something not working with the lights in first class. They have to remain on the whole flight. So we have to sleep with the lights on, and there's like hot, like bright.
Not the gentle lights, personal lights, but like the
emergency lights,
takeoff.
Like they just crashed the ocean lights, right? Where is fucking coach is dark. I remember taking my mask off at some point and being like, where am I? I'm in a hospital room. What is this? and looking back, and coach is pitch black. I was like, we're just back there. Yeah. So we fly with the lights on, and it is
sleep a wink.
Don't sleep a wink. It's awful. We get to New York at 3 or 4 in the morning. I think 2 or 3 in the morning. We walk off the plane, and it's like 35, and the rain's horizontal, you know, and we're standing out in the curb waiting for cab. The producer who's with us has a car waiting for me. He's like, "See you guys. I'll see you guys tomorrow morning." And so we have to get in this cab. We're stuck in fucking traffic too somehow at 3 in the morning, getting into Manhattan.
And we go construction. It
was construction, right? So we go and get into Brooklyn. So we go to stay at this hotel in Brooklyn in Williamsburg. And, you know, get into our rooms and pass out in the room. I just pass out in my room, right? And I wake up, this sort of dovetails, sorry, Josh. I wake up like 2 hours later with the TV in my room on and the volume at full blast. And and I'm like completely out of it. I just flew from the West Coast in a brightly lit first class plane. I'm cold, I'm out of my element. And now I'm in a hotel room in Brooklyn in the middle of the early morning with my TV on. I'm like, how did this happen? I walk over to the television and I stand in water. I find myself standing in water as I'm about to pull the electrical cord out of the wall to unplug the television. And this hotel, I'll also not mention the name of the hotel, was like an old factory before.
I had a great experience at this hotel.
Josh had a great.
I love the hotel.
And the water is pouring through the wall because it's such a driving rainstorm outside. And I'm standing there, and I remember pulling the cord out of the wall, the TV going off with a pop, and then looking down and seeing my feet were wet, and realizing I should have probably been electrocuted if I'd done anything different.
But we got off the red eye, didn't sleep. Eli tried to sleep at the hotel. I slept for a couple hours, but we had a 9 a.m. breakfast with the actor, and then literally spent 2 days at his house, and all these things, just like really diving deep into the material. We left with a firm commitment that he was on board, and then about a month later he bailed, and it was back to square one. So that's a little glimpse into the industry. Yeah.
Nearly killed yourselves for this guy.
Literally killed myself.
And why can't we just get another guy? Why does it have to die? Why does it have to go away? Why did it have to be him? Because Hollywood.
guy. There's a whole saga. It's a whole other show about
this particular project has been through many iterations, has been pitched many times. And
that was like the nerdy writer version of American Skyjacker. It's like it mirrored all the twists and turns, just like the clerical version.
The clerical.
Yeah. Golly. Guys, this was so much fun. I'm going to miss this pod so much, but I can't wait for the follow-up one where you sit down with all these people once again and have Mac reunited with the stewardess. I can't wait. And did you, even though no one's here and no one's listening anymore, did you want to tease season 2?
Yes. So season 2 is called American Coyote, to kind of set up that we're doing an anthology about these different amazing criminals that have amazing stories. American Coyote is about a man named Eldon Kidd, who is a coyote. He's from Huntington Beach, California. He's 6'5". He kind of looks like Shrek. And I mean that in the nicest way possible. He's an ex-Mormon, and he's white, which is strange for a guy who's a coyote. A coyote, to be clear, is somebody who runs people across the border from Mexico into the United States.
For pay, for money.
Yeah, between 1988 and 2001, Eldon ran over 1,000 people into the United States successfully, though 2 years of that time spent in a Mexican prison because he was caught driving an RV for one of his contacts in Mexico, and the RV, and he claims not to have known about it, was filled with marijuana under the floorboards. And so he ends up in one of the nastiest prisons in all of Mexico and is basically forced to box in prison director sanctioned boxing matches to survive. And then gets out of prison and goes back to becoming a coyote and running people across the border until 2001.
But just, truly lives up to the name Coyote in his wiliness and cleverness and the way in which he passed people over the border. No two passings were the same, and every scheme was crazier than the last one.
Same deal, 10 episodes?
10 episodes.
Same deal, 10 episodes.
Got all the interviews too, so you'll be able to see Eldon, That's due out mid-December too, by the way.
Yeah.
Love it. Thanks, guys. I can't wait for it. And I just loved your pod.
Appreciate it, man.
Thanks so much.
This has been the Pod Spotter, where we showcase the pods that you need to know about. But if you think you have one that we should know about, please let us know via thepodspotter.com or Facebook or Twitter or Instagram at thepodspotter. Thanks, y'all. This has been Zack Robodos. The Pod Spotter is created by the Price Brothers, produced by Oink Inc. Radio, associate producer Tori Adams, and is recorded and produced at Baker Sound in Philadelphia.